Welcome to the Municipality of Thames Centre regular council meeting, Monday, June 28, 2021 at 5 p.m. Seeing that we have quorum, I'm going to call this meeting to order. I'm going to ask the clerk, are there any additions to the agenda?
Yes, there were two presentations added to items 7.4 and 7.5 provided by the agent of the applications.
Thank you. I'm going to ask now for disclosure of pecuniary interest. Any council members have a disclosure of pecuniary interest? Seeing none, any announcements? So we're going to move to our first presentation, and that will be our municipal auditor, Ms. Christine Scrimger. Welcome, Christine.
Good afternoon, everyone. Sorry, I was struggling a bit there with my buttons. I believe you all have copies of the audited financial statements in your packages, and I'll go through them page by page. Please don't hesitate to stop and ask me any questions as we get through them. These are draft audited financial statements, so you'll remember until those charged with governance under the Canadian auditing standards, which are yourselves, approve these statements, they stay draft, and then that's why they're dated as of today's date. Once approved, then we move through and finalize them, and then the FIR is filed with the province. So that's the process of what we go through each year. It is a clean auditor's opinion, as I stated, and which means that I have no reservations on the numbers that I'm presenting. Audits are done within materiality of based on your overall revenue for the year, and your materiality in the year is $500,000. However, that doesn't mean we just look at transactions over that amount. Every transaction that flows through the municipality is eligible for a statistical sampling. So we sample through all your various revenue sources, your purchases, and your payroll. And having done that, I can offer you this clean opinion. Moving forward to a consolidated statement of financial position. So this is your balance sheet for the year, and you had a very busy year, as you can see when we get through these numbers. I always go sort of directly when I look at a balance sheet to that net financial assets number, which is about 3/4 of the way down the page. That would be the amount you would have in the bank at the end of the day if everybody paid you what they owed you and you paid off all of your liabilities. You can see it has decreased significantly from last year, but there's a reason for that. If you'll recall, there was a new debenture approved by council for $7.5 million, and that was to be used to replenish the development charges and reserves. And so that is shown down below in the liability section, and that decreases that net financial assets. However, going forward, what you've done really is financed an awful lot of capital this year. And so once we go forward into the future, that will provide you with that stability that you need. Under that line are your non-financial assets. So these are your capital assets that you need to have in place in order to provide the services you provide. And one of the other items I always look at is if you're replenishing the capital assets at least equal to what you're amortizing. So we have the capital asset cost, and then we take off that amortization, which is the using up of the capital assets. And you can see that you more than replenish the assets. If you look at tangible capital assets plus capital work in progress, which is simply capital projects that have not yet been completed, you can see that you've actually increased your assets by about $10 million, which is really significant. Part of that, a couple things that are part of that. One is that we did assume some assets this year, Y Creek being the main two different parts of Y Creek. And then as well, you can see in capital work in progress, we still have three really significant assets in there that are not quite yet complete, being the new community center, which has completed since the year end. So remember, this is as of December 31st, the Dorchester pump station and the Dorchester wastewater treatment expansion. So all significant assets to provide you with those assets that you need for the growth that you're experiencing. Coming down to accumulated surplus at the end of the year of $135 million versus $131 million. Any questions on that statement at all? Okay. Moving forward, the next statement is your consolidated statement of operations and accumulated surplus. Couple comments here under the budget column. I'll remind council that when we get to the expenditures that you do not budget for that amortization that I've mentioned, and that is $4 million. So when we get to the expenditures, although it looks like you've overspent by about 2.6 million, in fact, you've underspent when you take off that $4 million of amortization. Under the revenue, there's a couple increases there that I'll comment on. Under government grants, as you're aware, we got Safe Restart monies for COVID, which shows up in those government grants. And then under other revenue, you'll see a significant increase over both budget and the prior year. Those were the insurance proceeds that we received from the fire that were in excess of the capital. So a lot of the items that we replaced were not considered capital. They didn't meet your capital threshold. However, we did receive insurance to replace those items. Under expenditures, I don't have a lot to say in this area. You can see your expenditures, if you compare it to 2019, are very close to that year's actual expenditures, which also includes that amortization that isn't included in the budget. So then I come down to that excessive revenue over expenditures number, and that again is another indicator of where you're at with your operating revenues and expenses. And you can see you're very consistent with the prior year. So you're able to cover that amortization, that $4 million, which and still have $1.5 million in excess there. And then everything below that line are one-time type grants, contributions regarding capital. So we don't include them in the operating, we include them down below to separate out what's operating and capital. Government transfers, although we budgeted for significantly more than we received, it's really a couple projects that we had applied for grants. And because we did not get that grant money, we also did not start those projects. So the cost would not be in there either. And other than that, and the developer and other contributions related to capital, that last item. So when we issued that new debt, we issued it and then replenished the DCs. And so that's the decrease there, that 6.5 million that we put back to DCs. Coming down to that accumulated surplus at the end of the year, 135 million. Any questions on that at all? Okay, moving on. This is your consolidated statement of cash flow. So this shows the increases and decreases of the non-cash items. And as you can see, the large numbers are all dealing with the capital, which I've really already commented on. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this statement unless anyone has any specific questions. Coming down to cash balance, 16.2 million versus 18 million. And again, there's significant receivables at the end of the year that will replenish that cash when they were received subsequent to year end. The next statement is a consolidated statement of changes in net financial assets. And this really shows you those numbers regarding capital, which is obviously your biggest investment in a year in a summary format. We then get to the notes to the financial statements, and these are standard notes you'll see in municipalities across Ontario, actually Canada, as we follow Canadian standards. I will make a couple of comments on them. If you turn to note number 6, which is a breakdown of that deferred revenue, this is where you see that significant change in the DCs. So you'll see we just had 88,000 positive last year, and that was all DCs. We're now just about at 5 million. So we've not only replaced all that capital, we've used that debenture, as I mentioned, to replenish this. As well, there was a donation made in 2020 that we're going to use towards capital in 2021-22 of $1 million. So this is also a really good indicator of where you're at financially, because you do have these all these deferred revenues for capital items in the future. And the increase is significant there. The next note details your long-term liabilities, and this is where you see the 7.5 million showing up for the first time this year, and that's the reason for the increase. Note number 9 is really the note you're probably most interested in as council. This breaks down your general surplus and other surpluses to come up with that accumulated surplus. So I'll just sort of reiterate, you've replaced capital, you've replenished your DCs as you had wanted to do, and you stayed in a very good financial position with covering your operating costs. And then as well here, you can see your reserves set aside. We're at 13.5 million last year and 14.9 million. So another 1.4, even with all of that capital, new capital, we still kept our reserves at a level and actually increased that level. It says there that the general surplus is nil, but as you are well aware, we did transfer the operating surplus over into the reserves to be used for future purposes. And I don't have a lot more. The last note has just talks about the COVID restrictions, that you followed provincial orders and had to close facilities during the year. And that during 2020 of that safe restart, you recognized $123,000 of that money. The back of the statements are 2 schedules. One is the breakdown of capital assets by components. And as you can imagine, of almost 200 million of capital assets, 132 are in your infrastructure, which is water, wastewater, and roads. No surprise, I know. And then the last schedule is just taking these financial statements into a format that matches your FIR, which is filed with the province. And the FIR is filed based on functions, and these are the functions that are consistent with that FIR. In your package as well, you have the trust fund financial statements for the Dorchester Cemetery and my letter of rep, which has the journal entries, and those journal entries were provided by your treasurer in conjunction with our audit. Any questions at all?
Council, have any questions regarding this report? I just want to say that this is kind of the report that I used to dread, and now I'm actually kind of looking forward to it. So that must be a good thing. And I know that a lot of this is due to our really great stewardship by our director, Kim Grogan. So I have her to thank, and she's done a great job for us and really has made it a positive experience in all sorts of ways. Yeah. So again, thank you, Christine, for your report and taking the time to do this for us.
Thanks. I just also want to give a thank you to Kim for, as you can imagine, auditing in COVID, even though it's the second year through, it's not exactly an easy process. Your staff under Kim's direction have gone above and beyond, and I just want to thank her. She provides excellent working papers, and it's a great pleasure to work with her. So I just want to thank her.
Thank you. Great. So Council, we have a recommended motion that the following documents year ending December 31st, 2020 for the municipality of Thames Centre be approved. So 3 different reports. Looking for a mover, Deputy Mayor Elliott, seconded by Councillor Heeman. All in favor? Thank you. Thanks again, Christine.
Good night, everyone.
Nice seeing you.
You too.
Next on the agenda, we have our Integrity Commissioner, Independent Resolutions Incorporated, Mark McDonald. So he'll be appearing on the screen. Good evening, Mark.
Good evening, and thanks for having me.
I do have a question for you, because this is not something that we've gone through before, these steps before. I just want to make sure we're doing this correctly. We're looking at the report and you're commenting on the report. And then it's my understanding that Councillor Patterson's legal counsel is here. Is that not a delegation or a presentation, what point in time, or does she have, where does that fit into our report?
It's entirely up to you how you want to proceed. I'm happy to give an overview, and then you can move on to the response, and then come back to me if you want. It's entirely up to you how you want to run the meeting, but certainly he's entitled to have any representation he wants.
Great.
Actually, I welcome it. Great.
I just want to make sure I'm doing it the right way.
Yeah,
and good evening, Michelle. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thanks so much for having me. And I'm unfamiliar with the process too, so I'm in your hands. however you want to proceed is.
I think Unfortunately, I think Mark is familiar with all these processes, and it's a good thing because that's his job, but the rest of us are relying on him.
Thank you.
Okay, would you
Whenever
like
you're
me to
ready.
give
Yeah.
an overview? Okay, I think
Please.
it's important first, before we talk about the report itself, is to put the code of conduct into a context. I spoke to you a few years ago when I did the training, so it's been a while. As you know, codes of conduct are mandatory. They have been for a number of years. They're enshrined in statute, and they're really there to reflect ethical and legal requirements of municipal councillors. There's a high bar being set on interpersonal relations and how you conduct yourself. The act was, enshrined to make sure that the public could see how municipal councillors conduct public business, that it was transparent, that they did it with integrity. And so the terms I used when I came out to see you a while ago was, to be civil and to be respectful. It's okay to disagree. We expect municipal councillors to take different positions on items. That's fine, but you're supposed to do that in a respectful manner, and that's why you have a code of conduct to hold people accountable for their behavior. So your code, which was approved by a number of councils and set up by a couple of lawyers, actually municipal lawyers, uses words like integrity, transparency, maintaining public confidence, decorum, interpersonal conduct and interaction is used throughout the document. Respect for decision making, fairly and accurately communicating decisions of council. You're to refrain from making disparaging remarks. Tone and substance are important. So without going into the details of the report, I think you've all had an opportunity to read it. I got the complaint, I did the investigation, I followed the protocol, and have found that there were a couple of instances where the code was breached, 5.3 in particular, which says members will be open and honest, focus on issues rather than on personalities. That was done. It was clearly there were some statements made attributed that are personal nature that are in violation of the code of conduct. Secondly, there was an instance that's described in the report. We're talking about water rates and water volume and leakage and so on, where council's policy, I would say, was a misleading statement in the sense that the policy of council wasn't communicated accurately, and that's in violation of 5.4. And when it was brought to the attention of the councillor, he didn't do anything about it. He didn't correct it. He didn't remove it from social media. And by the way, the code of conduct follows members of council wherever they are. It doesn't just apply at a council meeting or a public meeting. It applies on social media. Anytime they're doing council work, they're to follow and abide by the code of conduct. So I've concluded that there were breaches as mentioned in the report, and I've made a recommendation to council. I will reiterate that this is council's bylaw. It is up to you to decide how you want to deal with it. I'm making a recommendation based on an independent review of the evidence. It really is entirely a recommendation for your consideration. So I'm prepared to, after hearing from our learned friend, I'm prepared to answer any questions you might have now or then. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. And you're right. You did come at the beginning of this term to talk to us about the code of conduct. And also, I know various councillors on this current council and previous councils have that opportunity each term to go and take those extra code of conduct discussions and talks. So it's something that we're well breached in right from the beginning. Thank you. And Ms. Kropp, go ahead. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Sorry, I just found out about an hour ago that I was going to be attending on Councillor Patterson's behalf. So I am just organizing my notes here. And again, thank you for letting me speak. My understanding is that Councillor Patterson has been afforded the opportunity to respond to the report. So I've given it a read. I am, as was mentioned earlier, I am council. I'm a lawyer, so I'm used to being called counsel as well. So when I hear all this counsel, it's a little confusing to me. So apologies for that. In any case, I have reviewed the report, and in speaking with Councillor Patterson briefly about it, my understanding is he cannot attend tonight because he's working. So I'm just going to say some words on his behalf, and I'm going to try and answer any questions if there are any. So here we go. So I appreciate Mr. McDonald's words, and I completely agree that codes of conduct are so necessary. I see in my own practice, I see a lot of stuff that could be avoided if everybody would just be civil. So in reviewing all of this, I just want to respond to a couple of the points. So I think Mr. McDonald concluded that there were two main breaches. So he read part of section 5.3 of the Code of Conduct, and I just wanted to expand on the sentence that he read, being the second sentence in that paragraph, which says, members will be open and honest, focus on issues rather than personalities, and avoid aggressive, offensive, or abusive conduct. So it's Councillor Patterson's position that in making the statements that he did, that was a focus on the issues and not personalities. So in his report, the Integrity Commissioner uses the dictionary definition of the word baffled and correctly states that it means to be bewildered or perplexed. However, he goes on to say that baffled can be considered as a form of ridicule. But that's not part of the dictionary definition of baffled. And the Integrity Commissioner does not state who's considering this or what the authority is for this proposition. And he doesn't state why or how it's a form of ridicule. And then the next issue is that Mr. McDonald characterizes Councillor Patterson's post as focusing solely on the mayor, but as noted in the report, the post reads Mayor Warwick's council. So it's our position that he's actually referring to the overall judgment of the council and not the mayor herself. It is a fact that the mayor is the head of the council as well, though. So there's just, for me, I guess there was kind of and maybe Mr. McDonald can explain this tonight, but there's just kind of a lack of explanation as to how section 5.3 has been breached with these posts. There's no really, and maybe this is the consequence of how the report is written, but there's no real explanation. So our position is that Councillor Patterson is focusing on council's judgment on an important decision to his constituents. And this is focusing on the issues rather than the personalities. There's no personal attack here on a member of council or abusive conduct. Simply being baffled doesn't constitute aggressive, offensive, or abusive conduct, in our opinion, which members are required to avoid under section 5.3. So I understand what Mr. McDonald's saying in considering the spirit of the code. However, it's a pretty high bar. Not only do you have to focus on issues rather than personalities, but you have to avoid aggressive, offensive, and abusive conduct. And stating the word baffled, in our opinion, does not rise to that, does not meet that threshold.
Is that your conclusion, Ms. Croft?
I actually just wanted to speak quickly to the water bill issue, if that's okay.
Yep.
Thank you. And so I guess the next section that's found to have been violated here is section 5.4, which compels members to accurately communicate the decisions of council. So Mr. McDonald found Councillor Patterson to have violated the section, but it's unclear to me anyway what council decision exactly he's misrepresenting. The water rate is what council set. It's not clear to me if that's the decision that Councillor Patterson is actually misrepresenting. I can advise that I have been told that the water department did attend the property and could not definitively determine a reason for the increase in the water bill. They only offered suggestions for a possible cause. So
Oh, but the plumber that came afterwards did. Sorry.
Okay, sorry. I guess I'm not privy to that information, so I can't speak to that. But it's our position that the actual bill amount is truthful. I haven't seen a determination of the reason for the significant increase. But even if it is a leak, the water rate based on the amount of water is accurate. Therefore, we don't agree that anything is misleading or inaccurate in the post, as Councillor Patterson never said there was or was not a leak. And again, that's my information. So if there is other information available, I'm not privy to that.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Croft, and thank you for joining us on such short notice. It must have been a bit of a scramble. So I'm going to turn it back over to Mr. McDonald now.
Thank you. First of all, I guess you got to look at the statement in its entirety. The first one, where we're talking about baffled by Mayor Warwick's council judgment. Let's add the word judgment and finish the sentence. So it's not just the word baffled. When you're attacking someone's judgment, that can have a whole lot of connotations. And so I think we need to look at that as part of what was said. The other part about the water bill, it's pretty clear that the focus was on the size of the bill, and the issue had to do with, fighting for water rates. Well, it wasn't the water rate that caused the bill. And when it was pointed out, and he received an email asking him to remove it, and he knew that the reason for the excess water bill, and I say it in there, it's an accurate amount. Well, when he found out the reason for it, he took no steps to try and clarify it. So that's in the report. That's why I pointed out that, in my view, those two sections were contravened, and I stand by it.
Thank you. Council, has anybody got any comments or questions? Deputy Mayor Elliott?
Thank you. So first off, I would like to thank our Integrity Commissioner for the preparation and presentation of this report. As council members, as you said, we are held to a higher standard, whether we like it or not, and we must respect the position that we hold, our colleagues around the horseshoe, and the staff that uphold the decisions that we make. When we make a decision, we must respect the decision that the majority of the council makes, whether we agree with it or not. We're all provided with information, and we are responsible decision makers, that we must put the best interests of our community forward when making these decisions. Singling out council members in a decision that a majority of council made is disrespectful, and it does go against our code of conduct, and I appreciate that the Integrity Commissioner came to that. There were two separate posts, one in which the mayor was specifically singled out, and one where both myself and the mayor were singled out. And I just want to say, I don't expect an apology at all from Councillor Patterson, and I am not going to lose sleep over this or this report by any means. However, I do believe that an apology is owed to the general public for misleading the public to believe the cause of that water bill that was posted to social media. And I also believe that an apology should be made to our staff, particularly our environmental services staff and our financial staff that went out of their way to assist and were flat out ignored when this post was made. And I know that in our legislative penalties and our abilities, we can't force apologies by any means, but I do hope that an opportunity is taken, that an apology is made to both our staff and the public following this report.
Any other comments, council? Okay, so we have a recommendation in front of us that council adopt a finding that Councillor Patterson contravened various sections of the Code of Conduct, and that Councillor Patterson receive a reprimand said breaches. And basically the reprimand is just this report coming forward in council tonight. So looking for a mover. Deputy Mayor Elliott, seconded by Counselor Heeman? All in favor? Okay, and against? Counselor Hunter? Okay, so moved. Thank you again for joining us tonight, Ms. Croft and Mr. McDonald.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Good evening.
All right, so now I'd like a motion that the regular meeting be adjourned in order to sit as a committee of adjustment under the Planning Act. Looking for a mover? Counselor Hunter, seconded by Counselor Heeman. All in favor? We wouldn't have much of Planning Act if we didn't go forward with this, would we? The meeting would be over. Oh, and Mr. Bushel?
Your worship, may I have a moment to address something with the planning meeting?
Yes.
Technically, thank you. Director Bancroft, through your worship, I just want to verify that the 39T TC 1903, which is Sifton and Monteith Brown Planning Consultants application, is not on this agenda.
That is correct.
Thank you. And through your worship to the members of the public, please take that into account because I have members who had registered for that meeting who are here right now. That's been canceled.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Thank you very much, your worship.
All right. So now we're looking at, let me just get my papers. So anybody that's out there listening, just to refresh that, there is no discussion about the Sifton and the Monteith Brown proposal tonight. So right now we're doing the public hearing for minor variance application A1321. I can advise that the purpose of this meeting is to consider an application for minor variance as submitted by Wilhelmus Tikopel. The property location is 24289 Fairview Road. And I'm going to ask our Director of Planning, Mark Bancroft, to speak to this.
Thank you, your worship. So with this minor variance, the applicant is seeking relief from the Thames Center Comprehensive Zoning Bylaw in terms of our municipal setback requirements to facilitate the construction of a livestock barn. For background, the subject property, it's a 100-acre farm located on the west side of Fairview Road and on the south side of Elginfield Road or Highway 7. This property contains a dairy operation along with a number of farm buildings, along with a single detached dwelling. These lands are designated agricultural under the official plan, and they're also zoned for farming purposes. And so the applicant is proposing to expand his operation with the construction of a 10,000 square foot livestock barn, which is capable of meeting the minimum distance separation requirements. However, the proposal fails to meet the municipality's more restrictive standards, which predate minimum distance separation. Specifically, the requirement under our zoning bylaw is a setback of 150 meters from any lot line, whereas the applicant is proposing to site his livestock barn 59.39 meters from the northerly lot line, which is Highway 7, and then 104.21 meters from the easterly lot line, which is Fairview Drive. The other requirement that the applicant is seeking relief from is the minimum setback requirement from a neighboring dwelling located on a separate lot. The requirement in the zoning bylaw is 300 meters, whereas the applicant is proposing to site the barn 215.41 meters from the dwelling located at 17078 Elginfield Road, as well as 256.63 meters from the dwelling located at 17014 Elginfield Road. I've conducted my analysis, your worship, as outlined in my report, and I'm satisfied that this application meets the required tests under the Planning Act. In terms of comments received and the circulation of the application, the county engineer, Hydro One, the Upper Thames River Conservation Authority, They all have no comment or no objection. Same as it applies to our drainage superintendent, our director of public works. And then lastly, our chief building official, he has no concerns provided that permits are obtained from the Ministry of Transportation. And I can confirm, Your Worship, that subsequent to those comments, a permit from the Ministry of Transportation has indeed been issued by the ministry to allow the construction of the barn. In terms of public comments, I have not received any responses from surrounding property owners. So it is my recommendation, Your Worship, that the variance be approved as submitted, subject to the reasons outlined in my report. Thank you.
Thank you. And now I'm going to ask if the applicant, if there's any additional information to provide. Do we have him, Mr. Bushel?
We have no agents, applicants, or members of the public for this meeting.
Okay, great. Because I was going to apologize to him for mangling his name, but if he's not here, I can't do that. All right, any members of the public in attendance who wish to provide comments?
No, Your Worship.
Okay. Any committee members have any questions regarding the application? Okay. So I'm going to ask the committee now to make their decision on the application by resolution. Deputy Mayor Elliott, seconded by Councillor Hunter. All in favor? Okay. So I'm going to advise that there's a written notice of the decision that will be forwarded to designated parties, and there's a 20-day appeal period. You may request to be notified of the decision by emailing the clerk. Now I'm going to ask for a resolution to adjourn in order to reconvene as a public meeting under the Planning Act. Councillor Heeman, seconded by Deputy Mayor Elliott. All in favor? So now we have public meeting consent application B1121. And the purpose of this public meeting is to consider an application for consent as submitted by the applicant 2165946 Ontario Limited, care of Rachel Mayer, and the agent being Rachel Mayer, and the property location is 18038 Thorndale Road. And I'm going to ask the planning director to provide an overview of applications, comments received, and planning recommendation.
Thank you, Your Worship. So this application for consent seeks to sever an existing farm generally into two equal halves. The subject property, it's a 204-acre farm situated on the north side of Thorndale Road and on the east side of Cherry Hill Road and on the west side of Cobble Hills Road. This farm is primarily used for the cultivation of field crops, but it also contains a single detached dwelling and an accessory garage. There are also some farm structures, including a silo, which is to be demolished. The lands are designated agricultural, generally speaking, and also zoned for farming purposes. So in terms of the lands to be severed, those would include the east half of the farm, and they would have an area of about 101 acres. These lands are vacant and they're used for the cultivation of field crops. The lands to be retained would be the west half of the farm, and the acreage is roughly 103 acres. These lands contain the buildings and structures previously mentioned, such as the farm dwelling, the accessory garage, along with some farm buildings. Council may recall that this property is also subject to application for consent B5/21, which was conditionally granted back in March to permit the severance of a dwelling surplus to a farming operation as a result of farm consolidation. At that same meeting, there was an application for zoning bylaw amendment Z2-21, which was also approved in principle with the implementing bylaw to be considered at a future council meeting once a reference plan has been provided to legally describe the lands. And to date, that reference plan has not been provided. Going into the analysis, Your Worship, of this proposal, there certainly is policy direction offered by the province, the county, and also here locally in Thames Centre to allow lot creation in agricultural areas where farm lots are of a size sufficiently large to maintain productive and viable farm units. Our official plan goes further to discourage the fragmentation of farmland unless new farm lots are at least 40 hectares in size. So given the size of the lands to be severed and the lands to be retained, that policy direction would not be compromised. And furthermore, those lands would be capable of meeting the zoning bylaws minimum lot frontage and minimum lot area requirements. So in all, this proposal would be consistent with provincial policy and conformity with our official plans. In terms of agency comments, from the county engineer, he is requesting the standard widening dedication along Thorndale Road, measured 18 meters from the center line, if across the frontage of both lots to be severed and retained, if the right-of-way is not already to that width. The Upper Thames River Conservation Authority, they have no objection, as does Hydro One. Enbridge, they've noted that should there be impact on gas service as a result of this consent, that any relocation work would be at the expense of the property owner. From the Director of Public Works, no comment. And finally, from our drainage superintendent, he notes that drainage reassessments will be required. To date, I have not received any responses from surrounding property owners. So it is my recommendation, Your Worship, that this application for consent be approved, subject to the 10 conditions noted in my report, and also based on the reasons outlined in my report. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Bushel, do we have the agent with us tonight?
Yes, Your Worship, we have the applicants.
Okay.
Erwin and Rachel Meyer should join momentarily.
Okay.
Hello,
Hello.
this is Rachel Meyer here. Sorry, my camera doesn't work.
That's okay, Rachel. Welcome to join us. And did you have any additional information that you would like to provide?
I have no additional information to provide. I think Mr. Bancroft gave a very good presentation of what we're trying to achieve here, and I'm just available for any questions, if any.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, he's usually pretty thorough, so yeah, we don't have to worry about that very often. So now, any members from the public in attendance?
No, Your Worship.
Thank you. Any council members have any comments or questions regarding this report? Oh, seeing none, I'm advised that the public meeting portion for this application has been completed and ask the council to make their decision on the application by resolution, considering all comments received. So Councillor Heeman, seconded by Councillor Hunter, all in favor? Great. And now I'm going to advise that the written notice of the decision will be forwarded to designated parties and that there's a 20-day appeal period from the date of notice to decision. You may request to be notified of the decision by emailing the clerk. Okay, thank you. And thanks for joining us tonight, Ms. Mayor.
Thank you very much.
Now we have the public meeting consent application B1021, as well as the zoning application Z1421. The purpose of this meeting is to consider applications for consent and zoning bylaw amendment as submitted by McCutcheon Consulting Incorporated, and the agent being DC McCluskey Engineering Limited, care of Mark McCluskey. The property location is 21778 Missouri Road. And Mr. Bancroft, would you provide an overview of the applications and planning recommendations?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. So the purpose of the consent applications is to convey a vacant parcel of land for lease purposes to facilitate the commercial development of the lands. And then secondly, the purpose and effect of the rezoning is to amend the provisions of the current zoning of the lands to allow for a reduced interior side yard and also to permit additional uses to allow the commercial development of the lands. The subject property, it is 4.5 acres in size, and it's located in Thorndale on the east side of Missouri Road and on the south side of King Street. The property contains an existing building which accommodates McCutcheon Farm drainage, which is located in the central portion of the property with a single access onto Missouri Road. This property is also privately serviced with its own potable well and septic system. The property is also, it's constrained by a municipal drain. It is a closed system, part of the Peterson Drain A, which bisects the north half of the property and runs in a west to east orientation. So with the central portion of the property occupied by McCutcheon Farm drainage, the northern and southern portions of the property are vacant and undeveloped. So going to the planning approvals that are being requested. So the application for consent, it seeks to convey a vacant parcel to establish a land lease, which is to exceed 21 years. And under the Planning Act, in situations as such, when one wants to lease an interest in land in excess of 21 years, then a consent is required from the municipality, and hence we've got this application before us. Specifically, the lands that are to be conveyed would have an area of 1.8 acres, and it would be the northerly third of the property. The lands to be retained, containing McCutcheon Farm drainage, they would have an area of about 2.8 acres in size. Also, the rezoning application, a reduction in the interior side yard width is being requested. The standard is 7.5 meters for a side yard adjacent to a residential zone, whereas a reduced width of 3 meters is being requested in conjunction with the following additional permitted uses, which are currently prohibited under current zoning. So the additional uses that are being requested would be a gas bar, a drive-through restaurant, along with an automated car wash establishment. As I mentioned at the commencement of my presentation, Your Worship, there's an existing municipal drain located on the lands to be conveyed. And recognizing the need to relocate the drain due to the proposed commercial development, a Section 78 improvement request under the Drainage Act has been requested and is necessary to allow the rerouting of the drainage works. So the municipality has retained its drainage consulting engineer to undertake a drainage report to determine the rerouting solution, which has yet to be submitted and accepted. I've conducted my analysis, Your Worship, and there certainly is policy direction provincially and by the county in supporting lot creation in designated settlement areas, with Thorndale being a designated settlement area. Furthermore, the Thames Centre official plan provides more detailed land use policies, which designates the property as general commercial, which provides for a wide range of commercial uses. In addition to that, the Thames Centre official plan also provides evaluation criteria for the severance of land. And the proposed consent would certainly meet the evaluation criteria, or is capable of meeting the criteria through conditions of consent approval and or site plan approval. So to date, site plan approval has not been applied for these lands. In the case of the zoning bylaw amendment being sought, there's also evaluation criteria provided. Most of that criteria is capable of being addressed as part of the site plan approval process. One of the criteria in particular deals with the adequacy of servicing to accommodate the proposed development. The existing building, as previously noted, it is serviced by a well and a septic system. And as a condition of consent, private servicing will need to be decommissioned with connection to the municipal water and sanitary sewage systems. And also the new commercial development through the site plan approval process, it will need to connect to full municipal services. Also, the road system is adequate to accommodate this development. No concerns were identified by the county engineer in the circulation of the proposal, other than the need for a widening dedication. Likely there will be the need for road improvements, which will be captured under the site plan approval process. In terms of the uses that are being requested, the additional uses, given the location of the property at the periphery of the village, outside of the commercial core area, a drive-through establishment, a drive-through restaurant would be appropriate. And considering that full municipal services are available, also a gas bar, car wash, convenience store accommodation would also be suitable at this location. As it pertains to the request for the reduced side yard width of 3 meters, it's important to note, Your Worship, that the zoning bylaw states that there's no minimum side yard width when a commercial development is adjacent to a residential or, sorry, when it's not adjacent to a residential or future development zone. So based on the conceptual site plan that has been provided, compliance with the current side yard width standard is capable of being achieved, considering this proposed commercial development would be adjacent to vacant, undeveloped lands that are zoned commercial to the east. The remainder of the lands, being the central and southern portion, they would have a side yard adjacent to a residential zone, that being Sifton's proposed townhouse condominium. And to ensure compatibility with that development, a reduction in the standard is not recommended, in my opinion, for the balance of the site. Lastly, in my analysis section, Your Worship, it's important to note the constraint associated with the municipal drain, considering there's a current setback requirement of 10 meters on either side of a municipal drain. And considering the relocation of the drain has yet to be determined, including a recommended working area for maintenance, it would be appropriate to defer consideration of this rezoning until that matter is resolved. The recommended working area could justify the need for a reduction in the current requirement, recognizing that this standard of 10 meters, it applies to all drains, regardless of the type, whether or not it's an open or closed system, or even the depth of the drain. In terms of comments received, Your Worship, in the circulation of the applications, the county engineer has noted the need for a widening dedication, 18 meters from center line across the frontage of along both Thorndale Road and Missouri Road. Also, the Upper Thames River Conservation Authority, they have no objection. No comments from Hydro One. Our Director of Public Works has noted that the building should be required to connect to the water system, and both the existing septic and water well will be required to be decommissioned and inspected. Our drainage superintendent, he notes that since the lands contain an existing municipal drain, future development could impact the drainage works, so no comment otherwise. And then lastly, from the chief building official, he notes, he reiterates my previous comment that the existing septic would need to be decommissioned and municipal services provided for the existing and new properties. He also makes note that the new property line proposed immediately to the north of the existing building decreases the existing limiting distance under the Ontario Building Code. The owner is required to obtain an architect to review the new proposed limiting distances under the Ontario Building Code and upgrade the existing building to comply with the Ontario Building Code. So those matters are capable of being addressed and considered as part of the building permit process, Your Worship. From the public, no responses have been received to date. So it's my recommendation, as it applies to the consent, that it be approved, subject to the 11 conditions that are noted in my report, and also subject to the reasons outlined. And as it applies to the rezoning, that the zoning bylaw amendment be deferred until such time that clarification is provided regarding the extent of the required and accepted working area for the municipal drain to be located on the subject property. That concludes my presentation, Your Worship. Thank you.
Thank you. So do we have the applicant or the agent here tonight, Mr. Bancroft? Or Mr. Bushel, sorry?
Yes, Your Worship.
Thank you.
Mark McCluskey is coming through.
Everybody hear me?
Yep, loud and clear.
I have nothing to present. Like you mentioned before in the previous applications, he's very thorough and explained everything down. I have a lot of notes I wrote down even for myself. So
Great. Good. Well, that's good that we've got someone who's thorough. Any members of the public in attendance that wish to comment?
No, Your Worship.
Okay. Council, any comments or questions? Councillor Heeman?
Yeah, just one comment that I think it's good we're keeping the stone welcome sign. So I didn't see that anywhere in the report, but I'm glad it's staying.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to advise that the public meeting portion for these applications have been completed. And I ask council to make the decision on the applications by resolution, considering all comments received. So we have two decisions. We're going to start with the consent, which is B1021, which is at the beginning of the motion. That's to be approved following 11 conditions. So looking for a mover, Deputy Mayor Elliott, seconded by Councillor Heeman. All in favor? Okay, and the next we have the zoning recommendation, Z1421, and the recommendation is at the bottom of the report. And that is a recommendation that we deferred until such time that clarification can be provided to the satisfaction of the Director in Planning and Development Services on the extent of the required and accepted working area for the municipal drain to be relocated on the subject property. Okay, Deputy Mayor Elliott and seconder, Councillor Hunter, all in favor? Okay, motion carried. I'm going to advise that the written notice of this decision will be forwarded to designated parties, and there's a 20-day appeal period. You may request to be notified of the decision by emailing the clerk. All right. Thank you for joining us tonight, Mr. McCluskey, and good luck with all your plans.
thank you very much.
And now we have, looking at my list here, a zoning amendment application Z1321, which is JC Green and care of Robert O'Neill, and the agent being Gary Blazak, and the report property location is 17406 Evelyn Drive. And I'm going to ask the planning director to provide an overview of the application and planning recommendation.
Thank you, Your Worship. So this is an application to rezone, to amend the provisions of the current zoning of the property, which is a site-specific agricultural commercial zone, an AGC-5 zone, to include an agricultural use as an additional permitted use in conjunction with the other uses currently permitted under the zoning of the property, to allow for the on-site processing of crops. The subject property, it's just under 8 acres in size, and it's located on the north side of Evelyn Drive and east of Heritage Road. The lands contain an indoor cannabis production facility, as well as an associated licensed outdoor growing area. The cannabis facility is located within a building 1,600 square feet in size, and it's privately serviced by its own well and septic system. The applicant previously redeveloped the former elementary school site into this production facility, which is licensed by Health Canada, and he is proposing the on-site processing of cannabis products, which is otherwise prohibited. So the lands are designated for agricultural purposes, and as previously mentioned, they are zone AGC-5, which allows the current cannabis production facility. I've conducted my analysis, Your Worship, And there's policy direction offered by the province through the provincial policy statement in conjunction with their document entitled the Guidelines on Permitted Uses in Ontario's Prime Agricultural Area, that this type of use is an agricultural use, and it's permitted according to the province. Furthermore, through the Thames Centre official plan, it includes some site suitability criteria that needs to be addressed in dealing with an application for rezoning. And most of this criteria has been met. It's important to note, however, that the property is currently subject to site plan control, in that there's an approved site plan and site plan agreement registered on the against the title of the property. However, there is some mechanical equipment in the form of HVAC units related to the operation of the facility, which are visible from Evelyn Drive at grade level along the south side of the property and also the east side of the property, as well as some rooftop units. Whereas the approved site plan doesn't contemplate these features. So as a condition of the rezoning of the lands to permit the agricultural use, it would be appropriate that the applicant be required to amend their site plan agreement to ensure that there's proper screening of the units to mitigate visual impacts. So in all, I am satisfied that the processing of cannabis would meet the definition of an agricultural use, given that it would constitute the processing of crops grown on site. In terms of agency comments received, Your Worship, during the circulation of the application, we have from the county engineer, no comment, our public works director, no comment, same from our drainage superintendent. From the Upper Thames River Conservation Authority, they have no objection. From our chief building official, he notes that a building permit will be required for the renovation of the building to allow for the processing of cannabis. In terms of comments received from the public, I have not received any responses from the public. Certainly no responses in writing, but I did entertain a phone call or two. So it's my recommendation, Your Worship, that the application for rezoning be approved in principle, and that I be directed to forward the necessary amendment for council's consideration once the site plan agreement has been amended and registered on title to require the screening of the HVAC units as noted in my report. That is my submission, Your Worship. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bancroft. And I'm just going to ask Mr. Bushell, is there any applicants or agents that want to provide any additional information?
Yes, Your Worship. Robert O'Neill is coming through.
Great, thank you.
Take the video.
There we are. Even got the Canadian sweater in the background there, ready to go.
Let's find the flag.
So welcome to our meeting tonight.
The agent here with Robert O'Neill, the president of JC Green. We're in agreement with Mr. Bancroft's assessment. The property, as you know, was rezoned in March of 2018. A significant investment was made in the property since then, probably more than $7 million of capital improvements. It's a fully operational and licensed production facility by Health Canada, and it now employs approximately 30 people. So it's been a big contributor to the local economy. The rezoning that we seek only applies to a very small part of the building, probably less than 400 square feet, which would be the extraction room. And there will be no outward expansion or alteration of the building. But if the rezoning is approved, and we complete the amendment to the site plan agreement, which we're in complete agreement with, it'll probably result in 2 additional highly skilled jobs being added to the workforce here. And if there are any questions about the nature of the work that would be done in the room or anything else with respect to the physical facility, Mr. O'Neill here would be glad to answer those questions. We thank you.
Thank you. And I think we're pretty familiar with the site, actually. We got a great tour when it first opened, and we're able to see everything that was done and how the school was repurposed. And it is a great employer for the area. So thank you for that. I'm just going to ask if there's any members from the public in attendance who have any questions. No? Any council members have any comments or questions? Seeing none. I'm going to advise that the public meeting portion, oh, somebody's got a question. Tom? Yep, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think this is it's a good project, and it's good to see more on-farm processing and value adding, and wish you the best of luck. It just it's great to have those filters in there, because I know it is a very potent product, and it's good to keep the area in good condition as well. So best of luck to you.
Appreciate it, neighbor.
So the public meeting portion for this application has been completed, and I'm going to ask council to make their decision on the application by resolution, considering all comments received. So Deputy Mayor Elliott, mover, seconder. Councillor Heeman, all in favor? Okay, thank you. And I'm going to advise that there's a written notice of the decision will be forwarded to designated parties, and there's a 20-day appeal period from the date of decision. You may request to be notified of the decision by emailing the clerk. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Nice seeing you.
Thanks.
Now we move on to a public meeting for official plan amendment 0121 and zoning application Z1121. Purpose of this public meeting is to consider an official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment as submitted by the Southside Property Group, London Incorporated. The agent being Asher Planning Incorporated, care of Melanie Horton, and the location of this property is Gore Road and Hunt Road. So I'm going to ask our planning director to provide an overview of applications and planning recommendations.
Thank you, Your Worship. So with the subject applications, they are seeking to redesignate the subject lands from the agricultural designation to extractive industrial, and to rezone from agricultural to extractive industrial to allow the establishment of a licensed gravel pit. The applicant is also subject to licensing from the province through the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry, who's the governing authority for gravel pits. Subsequent to my report, I will be providing a subsequent report will be provided in regards to an evaluation of this proposal, along with a summary of any issues that have been identified through the public and by agencies through the consultation process, including a recommendation for council's consideration at a future meeting. In terms of some background, Your Worship, the subject property is a 50-acre farm, and it's located on the south side of Gore Road and on the east side of Hunt Road. There are no buildings or structures on this property, and it is currently used for the cultivation of field crops. Along the frontage of the property, adjacent to Gore Road, there are some existing natural heritage features in the form of woodlands and wetlands. And lastly, these lands are designated and zoned for farming purposes. So in terms of the subject proposal, so a Category 1 Class A license has been applied for through the ministry to allow for extraction of sand and gravel below the water table. It's estimated that there is an aggregate volume of approximately 4 million tons, with the lifespan of the pit expected to be roughly 8 to 10 years, depending on market conditions, considering the proposed annual limit of 500,000 tons. So with below water table extraction, approximately 60% of the aggregate is found below the water table. So approximately 7 meters of aggregate found above the water table and 10 meters below the water table. In support of this proposal, we've got a number of studies that have been submitted in the field of hydrogeology, natural environment, noise impact, and cultural heritage in the form of an archaeological assessment. There's also been a planning justification report provided. So with a proposed extraction limit area of 20 hectares, the limit of extraction would apply to the entire subject lands except for that northerly portion, which contains those natural heritage features. And as well, there's a requirement for setbacks from those features, being 15 meters from the woodland and 30 meters from the wetland. And that extraction is not to occur within those setbacks from those features. There is berming proposed to mitigate noise and visual impacts along Hunt Road. And these berms are intended to comply with the ministry guidelines along with the technical recommendations stemming from the noise assessment. There's also a requirement for fencing around the perimeter of the site. And in terms of the haul road or the truck traffic, although my report makes note of site access from Hunt Road, truck traffic is actually to head west on Gore Road to the London Market area. My report makes reference to truck traffic heading north on Hunt Road to Dundas Street, which is incorrect. So apologies for that. And then finally, in terms of rehabilitation of the gravel pit, because there is extraction below the water table, it is to be rehabilitated to a natural environment use, resulting in a pond, approximately 11.3 hectares in size, with naturalized rehabilitation along the side slopes. In terms of comments received during the circulation of the application, Your Worship, I have no comments or concerns identified by the county engineer, our chief building official, our drainage superintendent, and our director of public works. In terms of public comments, I did receive one email, actually a couple of emails from Mike and Annette Albright, who live at 839 Hunt Road. They reached out to me for with a number of questions, all of which have been answered regarding the operation of the pit. So it's my recommendation, Your Worship, that my report be received, and secondly, that I provide a subsequent report evaluating this proposal with a recommendation for council's consideration at a future meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bancroft. Mr. Bushel, do we have the agent available tonight?
Yes, Your Worship. Melanie Horton's one. It's coming through.
Good evening, Your Worship, members of council.
Good evening,
Melanie Horton from Escher Planning. Thank you, Mr. Bancroft, for providing an overview of these applications. I had sent some additional materials through, and I apologize for them being sent through late. They should have just been received yesterday or today. Just some additional background. So in addition to the comments and the overview that Mark's provided, the only thing I would add there is that the operation of the site is going to be phased, and the sequencing would be generally extracting from the south of the site to the north towards Gore Road. The entrance, as Mark mentioned, will be off Hunt Road, just south of that woodlot and wetland area. And as the site's being mined, all the undisturbed areas would remain in agricultural use until such time as they're being extracted. Hours of operation proposed are 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Monday to Friday, and 7 to 12 on Saturdays, with no operations on Sundays or holidays. There's a groundwater monitoring program in place, which is fairly standard for a below water application. So there are 6 monitoring wells on the site that will be routinely monitored for water levels through the course of the operation. And there's also a well water interference protocol in place, which again is a standard requirement on a below water application. I just wanted to give you a little bit of an update on the Aggregate Resources Act process. Notification for that application was provided to landowners within 120 meters, and an advertisement was placed in the Dorchester signpost. And there was an information session held virtually on April the 20th. So we had a couple of neighbors, Mr. Nickley and the operators to the west were at the meeting, as well as the Pike family, but no objections at that particular meeting. The Aggregate Resources Act comment period ended on May the 3rd, and there were no public or neighbor objections. There were comments from OMAFRA, MECP, and MNRF. Both OMAFRA and MECP have confirmed they have no objections at this point. And Natural Resources has just asked for some additional information on the site plans. Notably, they're looking for some additional planting information along the woodlot area. And that's, if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer those for you.
Council, any questions for Ms. Horton? Oh, Councillor Hunter?
Sorry, I'll start again off mute. Through you, your worship, to Ms. Horton. When I look at the map, the southwest portion looks as though there's a bit of a forest or bush area there. Will you be mining under that, or how are you handling that?
Yes, through you, your worship. The woodlot in the southwest corner is proposed to be removed, and it was actually the subject of a separate application prior to the aggregate application being submitted. So it was, it's been reviewed separately and in advance of the application by, in particular, the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks. So yes, that the plan is for that woodlot to come out, and there'll be mining that will occur there. Ministry of Environment asked for some additional planting along the wooded area in the north end of the property as compensation for that removal.
Any other questions, Council? Is there any members from the public in attendance who have questions?
Possibly, your worship. I'm going to bring in Jay McGuffin from MBPC. I don't believe this is his item, but
Okay.
his registration is just not working right now. So
Okay.
Good evening, your worship. Jay McGuffin here. I'm just attending the meeting. I have nothing to, no involvement in this particular application.
You just have something, nothing to do on the Monday night, so you thought you would join us.
Yeah, I had a matter that was occurring this evening, and I have another matter at 7, so I was just interested. Thank you.
I'm glad you joined us, Jay. It's nice to hear from you. Any other members in the public or in attendance? Alan?
no, your worship.
Okay, thank you. Any council members have any comments or questions? So I'm going to advise that the public meeting portion for this application has been completed. And I ask council to make the decision on the application by resolution, considering all comments received. So we have the recommendation attached. And it's a report to be received and considered applications at a future meeting. Deputy Mayor Elliott and seconded by Councillor Heeman. All in favor? Okay. Carried. And moving on to our next public meeting with the official plan amendment 0221 and zoning application Z1221. The purpose of this public meeting is to consider an official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment as submitted by the applicant, A&K Payne Farms Limited, care of Alan Payne, agent being Escher Planning Incorporated, care of Melanie Horton. The property location being 6367 Dundas Street and 6508 Trafalgar Street. They're going to ask our planning director to provide an overview of the application and planning recommendations.
Thank you, Your Worship. So this application also seeks to redesignate the subject lands from the agricultural designation to the extractive industrial designation, and to rezone the lands from agricultural to extractive industrial to allow the establishment of a licensed gravel pit operation. So in terms of background, the subject property, it's located on the south side of Dundas Street and on the north side of Trafalgar Street between Elgin Road and Hunt Road. The subject lands, it's comprised of 2 abutting farms with a total area of about 164 acres. The southern farm, known municipally as 6508 Trafalgar Street, it is comprised of agricultural land, and it contains a number of farm buildings and a single detached dwelling. The northern farm, it is known municipally as 6367 Dundas Street, and it's also comprised of agricultural land containing a single detached garage and, a single detached dwelling along with a detached garage. As a whole, these lands are designated agricultural, and they're also zoned for farming purposes. In terms of the subject proposal, there's been an application submitted for a pit license, a Category 1 Class A license through the Aggregate Resource Act to allow for extraction of sand and gravel below the established water table, although no actual extraction below the water tables to occur. The extraction would remove aggregate to at least 0.5 meters above the water table. In terms of the estimated aggregate volume, we're looking at 1.5 million tons for the lifespan of the pit to be about 5 years, depending on market conditions, considering the proposed annual limit would be 400,000 tons. With a proposed licensed area of 163 acres, the limit of extraction would be restricted to about 144 acres on the site. There's been a number of studies, Your Worship, conducted in support of this proposal, including in the fields of hydrogeology, natural environment, a noise impact assessment, an archaeological assessment, along with a traffic impact assessment, and also a planning justification report has been prepared. So there's berming proposed to mitigate noise and visual impacts of the proposed operation around the perimeter of the licensed area. And that would follow the recommendations of the noise impact assessment conducted by the applicant's consultant. There'd be fencing around the perimeter of the site as required by the ministry. And in terms of the proposed site access, it would be off of Dundas Street, considering the primary use of the aggregate is expected to relate to the London market area. In terms of the rehabilitation plan, this pit is to be rehabilitated back to an agricultural use. In terms of agency comments received from the county engineer, he has no comment. The chief building official has provided comments in regards to confirmation that the extraction activity will not encroach into the required septic systems for the existing dwellings. In reviewing the pit plans, Your Worship, there are some notations which provide clarity to the situation in that the dwelling on Dundas Street, it is to be demolished prior to extraction activities. And then the dwelling on Trafalgar Street, it is to be retained and is far removed from the proposed extraction area limit. From the drainage superintendent, he has no comment, and also no concerns from the director of public works, considering that truck traffic is to use Dundas Street. In terms of public comments, there is one piece of correspondence that's attached to the agenda from Iran Bowman of 6327 Dundas Street, that would be the adjacent farm to the west, is requesting berms that they be extended in height to 5 meters, along with some plantings on top to mitigate noise and dust impacts. And he's also requesting that the berm be left intact adjacent to the haul route during the duration of aggregate extraction up until the pit is closed through the surrendering of the license. So it's my recommendation, Your Worship, that my report be received and that I provide a subsequent report evaluating the proposal with a recommendation for council's consideration at a future meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. So now I'm going to ask the agent if there's any additional information you'd like to provide. Oh, sorry, Mr. Bushel.
Your Worship, through you to Melanie Horton. Is Jamie Martell working with you on this presentation, or is he independent, or she?
He's James. So Jamie is from Airrock. He's the licensee, so they'll be the operator. So
yeah.
He's available to answer questions as well.
Okay. Did you want me to bring him in at the same time as you?
Sure. Yeah. He just sent me a note. He says he's here, just frozen.
Got to get on that better internet for the rural areas.
Yes. I can just start with a couple of comments.
Okay.
Thank you again, Mark, for the overview. I wanted to just explain one distinction. This is a below water application. And as Mark noted, there's no extraction below the water table. The Ministry of Natural Resources treats any license that extracts within 1.5 meters of the water table as a below water application. And the intent there is really to ensure that the hydrogeology and groundwater impacts are assessed even within that 1.5 meters. So that this application would extract to within a ½ meter with rehabilitation to replace 1 meter, so that the after use would be agriculture. There's Jamie. I see him popping up now.
Yes.
The operation of the site would be phased so that section at Dundas Street would be extracted first, probably within the first year or two, and then the southerly portion would be extracted after that. Again, undisturbed areas would remain in agricultural use, and if you've seen the map, you'll notice the bulk of the licensed area is along Trafalgar Street, with that sliver of land extending to Dundas Street. Actually used to be part of a licensed area, and the reason for that configuration is to allow access onto Dundas. That seemed to be the best route in this case. I think that's, in terms of the process, so the Aggregate Resources Act was initiated, that process was initiated after April 1st. Ministry of Natural Resources has slightly changed their regulations. So it used to be a 45-day notification and consultation period. That's now 60 days. And we're right sort of in the middle of that period now, with a comment period ending in mid-July. So at this point, there haven't been any agency or public comments that have come in yet, but as we can certainly keep Mark updated as those come in. There was an information session held a couple of weeks ago. Harrington McCavan, my former colleague Bernie Jansen, and Jamie hosted that, and I believe there were a few neighbors in attendance with some questions there. So if there's any questions for either Jamie or myself, happy to answer those.
That's 3 times now. 3 times I tried to get unmuted. I don't know. I was 3 strikes and I should just leave. Mr. Martell, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Any members of the public have any comments or questions? Do we have anybody, Alan?
Yes, Your Worship. I'm bringing
Okay.
through Ron Bowman.
Thank you.
Hello, anybody hear me?
Yep, we can hear you loud and clear.
Okay.
Okay, and just if you can, Mr. Bowman, just state your name for the clerk.
Ron Bowman.
Uh-huh.
We are the property owners just adjacent to the Dundas property.
Okay.
So Mr. Martel and Mr. Payne have informed us about all the plans, so there's no issues there. We're not against the plan, but I want to make sure that we will have a life while the extraction is going on, especially since we live on the other side. We have on the corner of 73 and Dundas Street a huge gravel pit with a fairly open license that can basically do whatever they like. And so we've been dealing that for years. So you can understand that I'm not really happy that we're now going to be surrounded by gravel pits. Having said that, I think if we, and I was kind of a little bit afraid of the phasing because when I read the report, it almost looks like the berm that's going to be placed for the first phase is going to be removed to level the land and make it back to agricultural. So then the berm is gone. So I want to make sure that the really high berm that's just next to the hauling road is going to stay, because that's going to be 10 trucks an hour. It's every 6 minutes a truck coming by for 5 years. So that's all I wanted to say, and I wish them luck with the aggregate.
Okay. All right. So I guess that is a concern that Mr. Bowman's brought forward. Do we want to speak to that, or?
Yeah, through your worship, and I'll have Jamie speak up on this as well. But in terms of the berm height, the height that's in the plans is based on the recommendations of the noise assessment and the noise engineer to mitigate noise. So that's additional height may not provide any protection beyond what's already been recommended. And to the comment about leaving the berm there, that's something we'd have to discuss with the Ministry of Natural Resources, because their priority is to rehabilitate progressively and as quickly as possible. So leaving that berm in place may mean that entire section would be unrehabilitated through the life of the operation. And that's something the Ministry of Natural Resources does not view favorably. So we'd have to look at ways to sort of accommodate that concern while still being able to progressively rehabilitate the site. The material in that berm, the topsoil and the overburden, is needed to be replaced so we can rehabilitate that portion. But I appreciate the concern. It's certainly something we can see if there's some ways to accommodate that. Jamie, I'm not sure if you have any comment on that.
No, not too much, Melanie. Thanks for covering that. Ron, hope you're doing well. There certainly is possibly some ways to look at increasing the longevity of that berm to maintain the noise more on our side longer. Possibly relocation a little bit west, right immediately on the side of the haul road, and still be able to rehabilitate the majority of the disturbed lands between the haul road and yourself. Let me look at what we can do to help accommodate that extra disturbance, because you are correct. It would be continuous traffic throughout that duration when there's no extraction happening in that area. So maybe we can find a way to promote the rehabilitation while also creating a noise attenuation burn to help you guys out, you and Gerard.
Perfect. Okay, thanks. Yeah, I was just going to mention, Mrs. Henshaw said that there was ample studies done, but I would like to know if there's any reason why the noise study wasn't on the public website. I did talk to Mark about it, and he says, well, we don't even have it. So that will tell you that it's kind of like, it's not that I distrust anybody, but if I looked at the environmental studies, there's none done where we live. Most of the studies are not done on our side of the road. And yes, it was way back, more than 20 years ago, there was a gravel pit excavation, but it doesn't mean that things don't change. I don't live in an open gravel pit, just for you to know. We have a bed and breakfast, and we would like to stay in business if we can, but we slowly are considering to just close down because of all these developments. That's going to be one business less in Thames Center. Anyways, and thank you, Jamie, for looking at those berms.
My pleasure.
Thank you, Mr. Bowman. Does that to conclude any other the public? Alan, is there anybody else?
No, Your Worship.
Okay, any council members have any comments or questions? Nope, seeing none. I'm going to advise that the public meeting portion of this application has been completed. I'm going to ask council to make their decision on the application by resolution, considering all comments received. Okay. Councillor, did you have your hand up? Councillor Heeman, seconded by Councillor Hunter. All in favor? So carried. And thank you everyone for joining us tonight.
Thank you. Nice to see everyone.
Thank you, Melanie. Nice to see you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now we're moving on to the draft plan of subdivision 39T, TC 2101, the official plan amendment application 0421, and the zoning amendment application Z721. And I'm going to advise that the County of Middlesex, who is the approval agency for plans of subdivision, has requested that the municipality of Thames Center conduct the statutory public meeting required by the Planning Act, consideration of a plan of subdivision. The purpose of this public meeting tonight is only to obtain feedback from the public on the subject application before making a decision at a future council meeting. Any written feedback that has been received will be considered by council when making a decision. And I know I'm fully aware of some information that came in a little bit under the wire today, and we've got that all in front of us. And I know that there's been a lot of public interest in this. So again, I just want to reaffirm, it's to get the information and feedback from the public, and no decision will be made about this tonight. So again, the purpose of this public meeting is to consider applications as submitted by the owner, Pembroke Thorndale Land Corporation, the location being 17177 Thorndale Road. And I'm going to ask the planning director to provide an overview of the application.
Thank you, Your Worship. So with this proposal being presented this evening, what we have before us is my report that I had prepared for council, which is a background information report describing the nature of the proposal and what the current policy and regulations are, along with a summary of the feedback obtained to date. So in terms of background, the subject property, it's 44 acres in size, and it's located on the south side of Thorndale Road and at the east end of Meadowbrook Lane and east of the Monteith subdivision in Thorndale. The property contains 3 farm buildings, and the lands are primarily used for agricultural purposes in the form of field crop production. While the lands are not currently serviced, full municipal services, including municipal water and sanitary sewers, they are available. The southern portion of the site is traversed by the Elliott Drain, with approximately 20 acres of land, which is proposed to remain undeveloped. Those lands contain a significant woodland, and also because of the nature of the drain, the lands are also regulated by the Conservation Authority given their flood-prone nature. According to the official plan, these lands are designated for residential purposes, and they're also zoned currently residential first density subject to holding, so an R1 category, along with environmental protection and open space zones associated with the property. Given the proximity of the subject lands to the village's well fields, which supplies potable water for the village of Thorndale, the property is largely located within a wellhead protection area, or a WAPA, and also subject to the policies of the Thames, Sydenham, and Region Source Protection Plan. Relevant policies and regulations under that protection plan have been included in the Thames Center official plan and also zoning bylaw through previous amendments. So as it applies to the subject property within this area, it's important to note that the current policies and regulations do not prohibit residential development opportunities within wellhead protection areas. In terms of the proposal itself, the developer has brought forth a plan of subdivision that proposes the following features. 102 lots to support single detached dwellings, 6 blocks to support semi-detached dwellings, which would accommodate 12 dwelling units altogether. 3 blocks to support medium density residential development opportunities in the form of single and 2-story street townhouse dwellings. Also, 1 block for stormwater management purposes, along with 5 new public streets, including an extension of Meadowbrook Lane from the adjacent Monte subdivision and a street connection to Thorndale Road, which would provide access for the internal road network for the subdivision. As well, there has been a number of studies submitted in support of this proposal, namely planning justification, a natural hazard study because of the drain, an environmental impact study because of the natural heritage features, preliminary servicing work, along with an archaeological assessment and a geotechnical investigation. In terms of parkland, no parkland is proposed to be conveyed to the municipality by the developer, except for lands on the south side of the Elliott Drain for passive recreational opportunities totaling about 20 acres. A bridge would be required across the drain to allow for pedestrian and maintenance access. In order to allow the medium density residential housing in the form of townhouse dwellings, the applicant has applied for an official plan amendment. Currently, the official plan only allows this form of development if 2 of the following 4 criteria have been met. And those include frontage on an arterial road, abutting a major public park, abutting a commercial area, and overall development application involving at least 2 hectares of land. So given the location of the subject lands, the developer is only capable of meeting 1 of those criteria, which is the size of the area. And as a result, because an additional criterion cannot be met, this form of development is not permitted under the official plan, and hence an amendment has been filed to allow it. Also, to allow the development of the subdivision, a zoning bylaw amendment has been submitted to rezone the property into 3 zones. Firstly, an R1 special zone to allow for the 102 single detached lots, followed by a site-specific R2 category to allow for the semi-detached dwellings. And the last residential zone being sought would be a site-specific R3 category to allow for the street townhouse dwellings. And then the balance of the lands which are to remain undeveloped in terms of those located south of the Elliott Drain, those lands are to be zoned for open space purposes. In terms of agency comments, Your Worship received in the circulation of the application for the county engineer. He's noted no concerns with the official plan amendment or rezoning. for the plan of subdivision. He is requesting a land dedication measured up to 18 meters from the center line of County Road 28, Thorndale Road, for road widening purposes if the right-of-way is not already to that width. The county engineer is also requesting a 1-foot reserve across County Road 28 to prevent any direct access onto the county road, save and except for the street connection. Also a requirement for left and right turn lanes at the intersection of Thorndale Road and the new street, and all costs with regard to the design and construction of those turning lanes would be the responsibility of the developer. The county engineers also noted that he would like an opportunity to review and approve grading and stormwater management plans for the property. From the Upper Thames River Conservation Authority, they have provided a lengthy written submission, and they've noted that they have reviewed the preliminary servicing report and the environmental impact study submitted as part of this proposal. And they've provided comments in response to those reports and studies. They are recommending a deferral of the proposal to allow the applicant an opportunity to address their comments. From Enbridge, they are requesting a standard condition of final approval that the developer be required to provide any necessary easements and or agreements for the provision of gas service. From Hydro One, they have no comment. From the chief building official, he has provided comments relative to the wellhead protection area, specifically for the medium density housing proposed. He's noted a requirement for a design to show the control of surface water for the lands affected. Also, he notes that he will require a copy of the environmental compliance approval from the Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks for any sanitary and stormwater piping within the wellhead protection area, generally speaking. Also require storm scepters or other alternatives to control pollutants with water runoff from the medium density blocks where parking lots may be created. He's also noted that no private wells will be permitted on individual lots within the wellhead protection area. From our public works director, he has no comment, and from our drainage superintendent, he has no comment. Your worship, we certainly have received a number of written submissions from the public, and I want to, if that's okay, I want to quickly acknowledge receipt of those comments with mentioning individuals' names. So we have Jean Lynn Arthur, George and Jamie Lynn Chant, Todd McEwen, Rick and Liz McDuff, Dave Chant and Tara Moyle, Joe Phillips, Tom Pincombe, Joanne Schinkel, Jason Sharp, Darlene Sinclair, Warren and Miranda Thrasher, Angela Vanden Bogart and Sean Westerick, Judy Verboom and Brian Bailey, and Jeff Wishelinski and Jennifer Ward. With those comments that they have provided, your worship, I think it's important that I provide a quick summary of the key areas of concern. Those include compatibility with the surrounding neighborhood, and that only single detached dwellings should be allowed, which is found in the existing Monteith subdivision. Secondly, that semi-detached and townhouse dwellings is inappropriate in this location. With Meadowbrook Lane and becoming a through street, that would lead to increased traffic, speed and noise. It would be less safe for kids and families. in that it should remain as a cul-de-sac. Also concerns about construction traffic using Meadowbrook Lane. As an alternative to a through street, one idea that was shared with me, Your Worship, was to provide a pedestrian connection, a walkway that would link both the existing and the new subdivision. Also a concern that smaller homes on smaller lots will decrease property values on Meadowbrook Lane, which offers larger homes on larger lots. Also concerns about servicing capacity to support this subdivision, considering development is already occurring with Sifton's Rosewood subdivision, the Y Creek subdivision, the Foxborough subdivision, as well as the Elliott Estates subdivision. Also a concern with school capacity over at the local public school, which at overcapacity, how is the school board going to accommodate this additional growth? Also concerns about the effects of the village's potable water supply with development proposed partly within a wellhead protection area. Lastly, Your Worship, we also have 2 petitions that have been received. One petition objects to the subject proposal and specifically creating Meadowbrook Lane as a through street into the new subdivision. And the second petition, an objection to the proposal to allow medium density residential housing units. So moving right along to my conclusion, Your Worship, my recommendation is that my report be received and that I be given direction to prepare a subsequent report to be considered at a future meeting of council. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bancroft, and thank you for putting that together for us. Now, is the agent available to provide any additional information?
Yes, Your Worship. I have 2 applicants in the agent. It's going to be a Colin McClure, a Craig Linton, and a Ryan Hearn.
Hello.
Hello, Craig. I don't know if anybody else is joining, so I'm just waiting to see who else pops up.
Yeah, I think it'll just be myself as far
Okay.
as that
Speaking.
goes.
Perfect. Okay. Welcome.
Thank you.
Would you like to provide any other information or any more comments?
Through you, Your Worship, I don't really have any other I don't have anything else to add at this point in time. I would like to. I just missed a little bit of audio, I think, from Mark regarding, I think it was the Upper Thames River Conservation Authority comments. Could I just ask Mr. Bancroft to repeat that section if it was in fact the Upper Thames River Conservation Authority?
Sure.
Yeah, through your worship. So from Upper Thames, we did receive a written submission late Friday, if not earlier today. They have reviewed the preliminary servicing report along with the environmental impact study. And they have provided comments in response to those reports and studies. They are recommending deferral of the proposal so that you be afforded an opportunity to address those comments. I believe you were copied on their letter, and if you have not received it, I'd be happy to provide it to you. Thank you.
Mr. Linton?
Yeah, thank you, Mark. If you could forward that on, I don't recall seeing anything of that nature. I'm kind of surprised actually, because we had been in contact with the UTRCA about this site for more than 2 years. They have provided input into our hazard and floodline modeling process all the way through. I do know that we were working with Spencer McDonald from the Upper Thames River Conservation Authority. It's my understanding he's no longer there. So whether something has changed in that regard, but I'll leave it at that for now. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else to add before I go to the public comment?
No, Your Worship. I'll be happy to answer any questions that that the public has, or you and other council members have at your discretion, of course.
Great, thank you, Craig. And so now, Mr. Bushell, any person in attendance wishing to make any comments regarding the application?
Yes, Your Worship. I have Joanne Still via phone.
Joanne, okay. And Joanne, just before you start, and I think everybody else who's on the actual call can hear me at this time, I just want to say that we are always sensitive as council to these type of meetings, because getting the information out and people understanding the information is not a perfect process. And I know that this is the part where you can ask questions. And I just want to stress, this is not where we make decisions. So I'm going to ask you to go ahead and bring your comments forward. And I congratulate you to do that. I think that's a great thing that we're doing that and hearing what people have to say. I also want to make sure that people understand that we're not looking for repetition. So if we hear a comment regarding traffic, and that unless you have something new to add, then the next person can add something new. But I just don't want to hear 25 people with the same thing, because I think we all understand what the issue is when the first person speaks it. So I'm just asking that in a very respectful way, because I think it's important that we have a conversation, but we don't have repetitive conversations. So having said that, welcome, Joan.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for letting me have a comment, a moment or two to have a say in this. I don't want to be repetitive, as you mentioned, but I just want to speak on behalf of some of us here on Meadowbrook, in that we were very disappointed in this decision that a lot of the children, all of the children on our street play in that cul-de-sac. We purchased here to have our son, learn to bike ride, build in the snow fort, all that kind of, stuff that's very important to the culture on the street. And that means a lot to a lot of us in this community. That, in addition with the smaller lots, smaller homes, the townhouses, will, obviously have an impact on our property value, which is also extremely concerning. So, I have to plead on our behalf to please just keep Meadowbrook as it is and not a thorough street.
Joan, would you mind providing me with your address for the clerk, please?
Yeah, absolutely. It's 30 Meadowbrook Lane. We're just one in from the cul-de-sac.
Okay, great.
And we have submitted concerns with Mark as well, but
perfect.
Yeah, I did just want to speak because I know a lot of people on the street and residents are, extremely upset over this decision.
Okay, good. Well, anything else, Joan?
No, I think that sums it up pretty much.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Please keep that in mind when making your decision.
Thank you for joining us tonight, Joan. All right.
Thank you so much for letting me speak.
You're welcome. Alan, any next person?
Yes, Your Worship, just one moment. I am bringing forward a Joe Phillips.
Joe Phillips.
Hello.
Hello, Joe. Welcome.
Good evening to all counselors and your worship.
Thank you. And Joe, do you mind giving me your address for the clerk's records?
13 Monteith Ave.
13 Monteith. Okay. And just go ahead whenever you're ready, Joe.
Okay. Well, a little bit of history. We moved in here in February of 1982, so we're one of the long-term residents. And we're quite in favor of the development that would go in behind us. We're not in favor of the way it's going to be developed, I guess. I've checked in this afternoon and yesterday on the Sifton subdivision, and the medium density housing you're going to put up in this subdivision is about 3 to 4 times more than the Sifton subdivision, which will have 300 homes. I'm not sure how you rationalize all that, but I know how I rationalize it all, and I'm not in favor of it. The other big concern, which I've been concerned before development ever started here, is our well system. And I would hate to think two things, that the progress we're making in development is going to jeopardize those wells. And I guess at that time, you'd have to figure out how we're going to hook into the Lake Huron pipeline, which would be no small task or no cheap task. And the way you're developing these medium density units in proximity to the well system, God forbid you'd ever contaminate all the water in Thorndale. Not trying to be repetitive, so if I have other issues to discuss, I will forward them to Mark or forward them to your worship or my counselor, Tom Heeman.
Yep.
And from there, but we're not against developing it, but we are against the type of development you're doing.
Okay.
And that's the way we feel and will continue to feel. And I'm sure there's a good majority of the other people in the subdivision think the same way as we do.
Well,
thank you for your time.
Thank you for taking the time to do this. And I just want to say, I know probably Mr. Bancroft could say this better, but when you have questions about the water and what we're going to do with the water in the future, a lot of that information is available on their actual website. We do have a water master plan that we have through the province. We're required to have that, and it's plans for different things. And when we get into different population limits, then different things are looked at, and it's all budgeted and done that way. So it is a very big concern of ours, Joe. It's not something that we take lightly. And as I said, like if you ever want to get more information right away on water, it's right there on the website.
I've looked at the website, but that's I'm in construction, so that can all
perfect
look great in paper, but it doesn't look too great when you run out of water.
Well, and it costs a lot too, doesn't it?
That's exactly right.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, Joe.
Okay, thank you.
Alan?
Your worship, I'm bringing through Mark Isabel.
Hello, can you hear me?
I can hear you quite clearly, Mark. Thank you for joining us. Could you give me your address for the clerk, please?
32 Meadowbrook.
32 Meadowbrook. Great. And whenever you're ready, go ahead.
So 32 is right next to the to the land, of course, and I'll have about 4 properties. The back of the properties adjoining my side. I haven't heard from Mark that that a possibility of a fence going all the way down from the south up to the north to Thorndale Road could be considered when before doing any kind of construction. It'll keep the construction noise down to a minimum of about 13 owners that share that boundary, and hopefully the children stay out of there too and help that. And aesthetically, it'll look a lot better. Another issue that I thought is over the years has been an issue with drainage. Prior to the sewers going in, they had pooling in my yard, and I couldn't cut the grass until late June and so on. With all the backyards, draining, sloping towards our fence line, it'll increase, the water, the winter melting, etc. So I want to make sure that those types of things are addressed, and we won't be getting everybody else's backyard water into our backyards. That's about it. All the other points have been taken up during the meeting. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Mark. Thanks for joining us. And any comments back from anybody regarding the fence and the drainage comment? No. So, Alan, do you have somebody else ready to go?
Yes, Your Worship. I have a Tom Pincombe.
Thank you.
Hello.
Good evening, Tom.
Good evening, Your Worship. As you say, Tom Pinco's my name. Joan and I, we've lived here at 14 Monteith Avenue.
Yeah.
And this is, we are the second owners of this property. 35 years ago, we bought this property because it is a large lot, large homes. It was known at the time to be an executive type area. We met many people, and one of those was Mr. Mel Monteith. And in 1984, there was only a few homes on some of Monteith Ave. Over the years, we have watched Houston be built from a hayfield. There really has been no surprises. Mel Monteith, he was still alive. He did do enforcement of his rules, and he maintained a high standard here. I'm here today because of the amendment notice that was sent out to us. And we filed objections against this change. I sent an email June the 13th saying we are against it. Many people in Monteith subdivision did not get this notice. We feel akin to most of the folks on the streets near us. There's about 114 homes, 77 signatures on petition. The notification says discuss this with your neighbors, so I did that. Every neighbor I spoke with said they were not in favor of these changes to the official plan. I said, it's your responsibility to tell council. So on June the 26th, one of our neighbors said, you need to get a petition. So on Saturday, we wrote up a petition. I got some help on Sunday afternoon to go door to door for signatures stating no change to the official plan. We found 77 people home. They signed no to the changes. People of Monteith Street, Meadowbrook, Park Lane, and Countryside. We weren't able to go back to the other folks to talk to the people that weren't home on Sunday afternoon. We were able to go door to door knocking Houston Street Monday this morning, and we got more signatures. Also, over the last few days, I visited on the telephone with about 29 people, and they keep saying no changes to the official plan, area east of Monteith Avenue. Of the Monteith subdivision, no changes known as phase 4. People want the larger lots, large homes in this area. 106 contacts said no change. The official plan allows for townhouses, semi-detached, apartments, and low-income spots west of the railway line. And they are built, owned, rented, and more are being built there where the zoning is for this type of building. I sent the petition to council today and also to Thames Center administration. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pinkham. And I just want to reassure you that we received your petition. And I just want to say that, you know, no matter if we agree or don't agree, I want to congratulate you on your concern and that your involvement with the public. I think that's very admirable. And I think people should be happy that you're their neighbor.
Thank you again, Your Worship.
And Alan, oh, sorry, Tom, you're 14th. Yeah, 14 Monteith. I got it. I just didn't know if I had the address, but I've got it. Thank you. So Alan, anybody else?
No, Your Worship.
That's it?
Yes, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to ask any council members if you have any questions or comments regarding the applications. Deputy Mayor Elliott.
Yes, through your worship. So I spent most of my afternoon going through old council agendas back from the 70s when my grandfather was actually the reeve of West Missouri Township to look at the discussions revolving around the development of the Monte subdivision, as well as the land that we're discussing today. And I know it's fair to say that much has changed from 1973 when Mel Monte first came to council with the idea of creating this subdivision. So I received significant feedback from residents, and there was a lot of confusion on whether or not this property in question was known to be developed. And I know I can say from being born and raised in Thorndale and living just shy of 35 years, it was always my understanding, but it should always be confirmed with evidence versus hearsay. So the mapping, the 1985 West Missouri Township official plan somewhat shows this property in the settlement area of the village, albeit digital mapping was not a strong point in the 80s. So much of it's a guessing game, but taking a look at it, it does appear that the settlement area is generally halfway between what is now known as Heritage and Fairview along Thorndale Road. But if you go into the 1991 West Missouri Township zoning bylaw, it's much more complete, and the property in question is zoned future development. And also to make that note, the mapping in the zoning bylaw clearly showed that Meadowbrook Lane, although it may have a turning circle now, was not a cul-de-sac and was not designed to be that cul-de-sac. So we're going back more than 30 years that this land has been zoned future development and has made it through the amalgamation. So as I mentioned, times changed, and so does our society. In the 70s, we were building homes on 20,000 square foot lots simply because that was the market. However, after this, in our meeting, we're receiving Middlesex County's Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan, and housing and homelessness is a big part of this plan with some staggering statistics in it. What we know from that plan is the objectives of increasing affordable, quality, and mixed housing options is to encourage and increase inclusivity and diversity to be built into our housing environment. Comments that we've received via emails and letters suggesting that the new areas being built west of the tracks should have semis and townhouses versus this property creates a sense of unwelcoming segregation of our community that is not at all inclusive. I know when I first purchased here in Thorndale with my husband and 2 kids, we purchased a semi-detached house on Leesville Trail in Y Creek subdivision. We since moved from there, but that was probably the best 6 years. And I will tell you, I never felt less than for having a semi-detached house in a new subdivision versus someone who had a large lot, say in the Monte subdivision. However, some of the comments coming from into council leave that tone. And I would like to say that those aren't welcome. The work that I Love Thorndale has done in our community to provide a welcoming sense to anyone who moves in or has lived here for many years, whether they've been here 1 month or 100 years. When we first started, we wanted everyone to belong, and the work they've done to create that inclusive community, whether you rent, live in a condo, it's semi-detached, whatever, everyone is included, and that should not end with the subdivision plan. And I just want to talk very briefly about the school because comments were raised about that. The municipality has no say in our school. And as someone who has been very involved with our local school board trustees and the success of our school in Thorndale, our responsibility lies with the Thames Valley District School Board. And last week, they presented a school accommodation plan to their trustees. In that report, which I did post to social media, West Missouri Public School does have a 118% capacity. And I shared my concerns with the trustees with upcoming subdivisions, including this one that we're talking about tonight, and what was Thames Valley District School board's plan. Trustee Sean Hunt did ask this question during the meeting, in which the school board staff replied that they knew we had development here in Thorndale. However, it was their opinion. We are a maturing community and they're not concerned with the capacity of the school, and that their forecast is that the population will plateau. Trustee Hunt did share with the school board staff that his municipal partners disagreed with their assessment, and school board staff said they would be happy to set up a meeting with us, in which this information has been shared with Mayor Warwick, CAO Henry, and as well as our Director of Planning and Development. There are no holding zones in the Thorndale community, and there's no plans to add any, including the subdivision, which means it's the responsibility of Thames Valley District School Board to find room at West Missouri Public School for anyone who moves into the Thorndale and catchment area. I will say to the audience watching that you elect your school board trustees just as you elect those around the horseshoe, and they are accountable to you. If you have concerns about the growth of our community as it relates to the school, you should share them with your school board trustees. And I will also add that Councillor Heeman did bring a motion that was unanimously supported by our council to create a local school board advisory committee, and there is still a community member vacancy on that committee, as we only had 2 people in the entire municipality apply to it. So if you are invested in our school success, I would highly suggest that you contact our clerk and find out how you can get involved.
Thank you. Any other council members like to comment? Councillor Heeman.
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor Elliott, for covering a lot of the topics that have been brought forth, and specifically for addressing the, I think, the comprehensive approach that individuals in the corporation and on council are making to try and have a dialogue with the public school board about our needs here, current and future, regardless of how this development goes. And so that, I think that is a very important point to highlight. And again, there's people who are purchasing homes in the existing Monteith who still have those requirements. I think I'm hearing a lot of similarities to a meeting that we had earlier in the year in the winter with regards to development in Dorchester, and you know, some of the similarities are, again, being very close to source water protection area, and an area that was developed quite some time ago. And I think people have been accustomed to you know, looking at a certain landscape and appreciating that landscape. I know I certainly enjoy a farmer's field more than often, and so I think that we do have a very tight-knit community here. Again, you can see how just one street and has pulled together quite quickly, defending their own values and what defines their sense of home, and that street is quickly spread to the whole subdivision. You know, I think that it is important that we have housing in our community. Again, it's very difficult for my generation to find a place to live, and we know that home ownership is the cornerstone of a sustainable livelihood, and the perpetuation of our overall health and well-being. So the things that came forward from our previous meeting, again, are reflected here, and I think it's important that you as developers, you know, take back what you've heard from the community. And again, we're not opposed to having good quality homes for everybody, and everyone needs a place to live. And like Deputy Mayor Elliott said, the homes that were built in the 50s were quite different than the homes that were built in the 70s. And I'm very interested to see what is in store for our community. So I would like to put down a challenge that we just take as much care as possible to really provide a distinctive character to the homes and to the region that you're proposing, and to think carefully on what has been shared with you today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Heeman. Anybody other comments? Just have one, and that's we do have that spot on that school board committee. So if Craig, Ryan, and Colin want to step up, you're more than welcome to do that. Now, I also want to advise that the public meeting portion of the applications has been completed. So I'm asking council to make a decision. There's a planning recommendation attached. So looking for a mover, Deputy Mayor Elliott, seconded by Councillor Heeman. All in favor? Okay, I'm going to thank those in attendance, and especially the people that took their time out of their evenings to put their opinions forward, and advise that when council makes a decision at a future meeting, that the prescribed information will be submitted to the approval authority, the County of Middlesex. Any person or public body may make written submissions to the approval authority before the approval authority makes its decision under the Planning Act. And now I'm going to ask that I'm looking for a motion to adjourn the public meeting and council reconvene its regular meeting in order to continue with its deliberations. Councillor Hunter, Councillor Heeman seconded. All in favor? Thank you. And thank you, gentlemen, for joining us tonight. All right, next on, we have the consent agenda. So the items listed on the consent agenda are considered routine and may require discussion, but no action on the part of council. Consent items are received for information in one motion. Council members may request that one or more item be removed for further action. So on the consent agenda, we have regular council minutes from June 14th, 2021. And then we have the AMCTO, which for all of you that love acronyms, is the Association of Municipal Clerks and Treasurers of Ontario. That's regarding an award recognition. That I just want to congratulate anybody that staff that are listening, and of course our CEO Mike Henry for getting this together. It was the award for the app, and if anybody doesn't have that app on their phone, they're missing out because it's a great source of information. So again, it's nice to be recognized for that kind of thing, and thank you again for getting that together for us. So I've got a motion here that the regular council meetings of June 24th, 21 be adopted as presented, and that the consent agenda item 8.2 be received for information. Deputy Mayor Elliott, seconded by Councillor Hunter. All in favor? Okay, now we're moving on to the reports of the departments. First report is admin 0621, which is community safety and well-being plan 2021-2026. And is that your, who gets to speak to that? Councillor, okay. So you.
That's okay. Thank you, Your Worship. That would be me taking this one. Just a quick summary. The provincial government enacted legislation through the Police Services Act requiring municipalities to adopt a community safety and well-being plan. And under that legislation, municipalities had the discretion to develop joint plans with surrounding municipalities. That's what, of course, we did. Our plan was completed in conjunction with the County of Middlesex and the municipalities within it. Therefore, before your council is admin report 00621, community safety and well-being plan with recommendations to be received, approved, and then sent on to the Solicitor General for acceptance. And I'm happy to answer any questions if council requires.
Okay. All right, council, you've had a chance to have a look at that. Anybody want to comment on that? No? Okay. And so then looking for a motion for the recommendation to receive, approve, and send it on to the Solicitor General. Councillor Hunter, seconded by Deputy Mayor Elliott. All in favor? Okay, unfinished business, seeing none. Any notice of motions that we're not aware of? Seeing none. No new business. Nope. Closed session, none. Bylaws, we have a recommended motion that bylaws 56/2021 and 57/21 be adopted as presented. Bylaw 56/21 being 2021 being a phase 3 subdivision agreement with North Key Foxborough Land Corporation, and that bylaw 57/2021 being a confirmatory bylaw. Looking for a mover. Deputy Mayor Elliott, seconded by Councillor Heeman. All in favor? Okay. We're looking forward to seeing everyone at our next meeting, which will be Monday, July 12th at 1 p.m. And now the moment you've all been waiting for, a motion to adjourn. Councillor Hunter, seconded by Councillor Heeman. All in favor? Thank you, and thank you. Good night, and thanks, Alan, for making that all work quite smoothly.